All right, guys, what is going on? Today we have Aaron Miller, owner of Ninth Moto, fabricator, tuner, driver, builder, some of the fastest streetcar Vipers in the country. One of the more unique V10 platforms he's been working on. And he's in the studio. He's going to tell us some stuff about it. We're going to try to pry into the V10 world as much as possible here. Why is the Viper V10 the best production motor right now? Because I feel like you kind of teased that a little bit on Facebook.
Excuse me. You know, it's funny. Like, you could go two directions with that, right? Like, there's the part that, in some ways, I kind of believe that. I'm like, wow. I mean, think about it. Like, what it's capable of doing is not, it's not single objective. Like, it's been an extremely successful engine in endurance racing. It's been an extremely successful engine in off-road racing. It's been an extremely successful engine in marine stuff, which not everybody knows. And then you've got this car market thing that we were playing with. And yeah, it's kind of like I mean, I know when I asked the question, it's funny. It kind of got taken in a tangent by some people as like,
yeah,
oh, we're waiting for the shoe to drop. Like, check out this cool micro record or whatever. Like, no, it was just really like, how many OEM engines, how many OEM head and block combinations?
Yeah, like actual block, because we're not talking a big block, a big M, or like a billet block. We're talking like,
there is not an aftermarket alternative.
Dodge Fiat. Yeah.
Like, anything that's been done to it, we have to do to it, and it started life in that car. Like, we didn't order it out of a catalog. Not that that's bad. You just don't have it as an option for what we do. So, how many engines like that can produce the power required to propel a 4,000-pound race weight car, which is where the big like stipulation comes in, right? But like,
I mean, that's huge though, because when you talk about street car, that's just the flex at that point. It's
like it is, I guess. But it's also the reality. Like, I can't, so many people are like, there's no way, and it's like, man, the crank in that engine is 98 pounds. Like, when you start thinking about, okay, you got a crank, you got 10 rods at, well, we run a steel rod combination, so you're going to be in without getting too particular, we'll say like upper 600 grams each. And 10 pistons, you got, if it's an auto car, you got a pretty heavy converter behind the thing, flex plate, damper, blah, blah, blah. Like, in crank train, you're talking about fast math, probably somewhere around 200 pounds of rotating assembly going on around there.
Of just spinning,
Yeah, just spinning stuff, right? And so you start to think about that, and you go, all right, so that's really heavy, and then you got 50 to 60 pounds per turbocharger. You got a ton of intercooler on the car, because our cars are ethanol cars. Well, flex fuel, but yes, ethanol cars.
Yeah, I saw those billet intercoolers. There's something to look at too.
Yeah, I mean, so it's well, and that's kind of part of the story of how we got here, right? Like, that engine's not necessarily a very efficient engine if you want to look at it in a power per cube type aspect.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's a trade-off. Like, you go up on power per cube, you typically go down on longevity. I'm not trying to blanket statement that the internet will crucify us all, but like, it's
and just to like, kind of for layman's that people may not know, it is a V10 push rod.
Yeah.
Single cam in the valley, like kind of very LS like almost.
So interestingly enough, it is, and at the same time, it's a Chrysler small block, more or less, like a 360 series or a LA series Chrysler small block. So 318 or 5.2, 5.9 360, stuff like that. The bore spacing is Chrysler small block. That's what it kind of call it, the bloodline, if you will. So yeah, it's 2 valve per cylinder, overhead valve. Nothing really fancy about it. Aluminum block, steel liner, aluminum heads. I don't know.
Yeah, do you guys run that thing? So motor, how far into it? Did you put sleeves in it?
Yeah.
So we're talking about the Gen 5 car here.
Yeah. So we could probably solidify, even though like one of the cars that people see us race is Juggernaut, Will Dugas car. That is a Generation 2 Viper, but it's a Generation 5 engine that's in the car. And that has everything to do with just cylinder head architecture. Like, finally, by the time the Generation 4 Viper came around, Chrysler had to make a bump in power, and they did so significantly from the Gen 3 to the Gen 4. And it basically, while the short block is not the same at all, but it very little differences there in the grand scheme of like power production.
Yeah.
All of that came into like, oh, let's actually put a decent cylinder head on this thing, because you go way back in time in like the Gen 2 Vipers. I mean, they really are the quintessential like almost diesel engine of the
boat engine
gasoline.
out of it.
Oh
yeah.
man, you know,
Anchor.
they peak torque by 4,200 RPM or something, and they're nosing to the ground by 5,500.
Really that low?
Oh yeah, they are not spinners.
That
in the early
is
gen.
diesel.
Yeah. So you had a lot of that in the early gen. Then Gen 4 and 5, they all of a sudden they figured out if you put a half decent cylinder head on these things, you could do something pretty cool. So that's what ended up happening. But yeah, Gen 5 architecture, stock block, a sleeve that we've come up with that we put in there, billet main caps.
Yeah, the normal stuff
Yeah,
on
nothing.
that deal.
Yeah, nothing. Really
And then
too
cylinder heads,
spectacular.
obviously, like, LS world, I kind of come from. You can order, I can get a set of cylinder heads here in a weekend if I
Gnarly
had to.
ones, awesome ones, right? Like
Badass,
yeah,
custom casting type of stuff.
all the good stuff.
But when you guys are talking about Vipers, and then it's not even just Viper, it's multiple generations that
Yeah.
don't share the same thing. LS's GM didn't want to change them things.
Yeah, right.
We're kind of cheating in that aspect.
Yeah.
So you guys, how did you do it on Will's car? Is it like backtrack? Do you have a newer motor in his, or is it still?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
so-
mean, the premise behind that car, because we said, hey, we're really going to head down like I would call it a drag and drive style build layout on that car. We immediately went, okay, the Generation 5 stuff is so much better. We're just going to start there and then progress.
Yeah.
So we have OEM castings, and we have developed quite a few different configurations of cylinder head port design on that over the years, and evolved to where we are now. In the most recent iterations, there's some, I'll say, fairly intricate work performed to them to kind of help go down the road of making the engines more durable at high power. So anybody can kind of put two and two together and kind of figure out what we're talking about there. But as far as,
Yeah.
you have to think about things like what the general purchaser may not understand about like an aftermarket cylinder head is one of the big things is deck thickness, right? Like
Yep.
you get a bunch of deck thickness on there so the head stays rigid on the block. We don't have that, like we don't have that aftermarket casting. So we have to work really, really hard at keeping the head gaskets down on these things. They are a 4-bolt per cylinder arrangement. So much of the LS world might, basically think of taking like a stock 4-bolt LS.
Yep.
And now we're going to figure out how to make that thing live at, generally speaking, I would tell you at the higher end, we're probably talking about around 370 to 380 horsepower, crank horsepower per cylinder
Yeah.
at that point in time.
Okay, so what total is that thing putting out at the crank then? I mean, I could do the math, but I'm not smart enough. So maybe just
Well,
tell
the good
me.
news, it's 10, right? So like at that, we're talking, 3,800 crank horsepower now.
Goodness,
So,
out of
I
a
think-
stock block, stock head, stock crank.
not a
Ru-
crank.
Okay,
They
so
do-
aftermarket crank.
Yeah, aftermarket crank. Stock crank, we can comfortably run up to right about 2,000 wheel horsepower. is where
Okay,
we kinda
and
say,
then
okay,
do you
that's
just start to deflect them, or is it like actually breaking them?
It's an interesting thing. Part of it is you start asking yourself, is this a good idea? So that's another segue where you kind of have to start looking at it different versus if it were my own car and my own livelihood and whatnot in the car. I mean, in some cases, yes, but we're building these cars for people to take, have, and use. And ideally, we would like to not see it back, if that's at all possible, right? So
Yeah.
at some point, you start saying, "Hey, is this really such a good idea anymore?" So we've ran a number of cars at or above 2,000 wheel horsepower, deliverable to customers' hands, and to date, we've had 2 crankshafts ever that have failed. One of which we never actually knew, honestly. Like the car came apart, and we found in the Magnaflux, we found that it was starting to crack in one of the rod journal areas. So it was coming apart anyways to actually go to more motor combination and a billet crankshaft and stuff. So that was kind of fortunate. But aside from that, we had a snout come off once, and that was a never to be duplicated again type situation.
Yeah,
to date
just
now.
One
So
of those weird issues that
yeah,
happen.
maybe. Yeah, I don't know. So that car,
Dodge custom.
yeah,
Dodge,
right. I mean, well, you got to think, right? Like it's an OEM car. It's just you're relying on the manufacturer that then did their QC that then made it through
would they have
Chrysler.
500 horsepower factory? 600.
640.
Okay, yeah. I mean, they're healthy cars, and there's not all that many of them either.
No.
There's not that many motors available. I don't know how easy they are to get from Dodge. Like,
Yeah.
will they just sell me one if I call it up, or are they like, hey, you need a VIN number from an ACR?
You know,
Like,
so they're not that hardcore about it. I'm pretty sure you can buy one from the dealer if you want to right now.
Okay.
That you might have a bigger problem on availability than you would on like actual, like, do they want to sell you one? I mean, when you talk about low production, I don't know if people recognize it about Viper. Like, 1992 to 2017, so 25 years of total production. You could roughly say there's about 25,000 Vipers over 25 years of production. So you take that and look at any other real performance platform. I mean, that makes a Huracan seem like a Camry almost. It's like it's actually fascinating how little of those cars made it out, and how long it actually lived a production lifespan then. Generation 5 in specific is, I actually don't know how many in total, but it's not like a staggering number. I mean, they were on the number of hundreds of cars in certain years and trim specifications, TA, ACR.
yeah, like one of those where they freaking know every car almost that came out.
I'm pretty sure there's a registry and guys pay close attention to that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a very low production car. And that does pose a little bit of a complication at some times. And I think more so what it's come to and what we realized a long time ago is that many of the solutions that we're going to need, we're just going to have to come up with on our own, some way, shape, or form. So you have to be extremely resourceful. You got to be quick on your feet. You got to be forward thinking on the product line and kind of seeing where maybe the trend of the market is going. For us, at least, there's
But you guys are kind of setting the trend a little bit, though, too.
Well, yeah, there's very few of us, right?
You can't really predict the trend that you're setting.
Well,
There's a couple people building Vipers, but like 3 that I know of, and it's
basically.
It's not a huge market. We're in a small world in the car world.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody knows each other.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Yep. And even if you don't, I mean, actually, the first time you and I met face to face would have just been at Texas 2K.
Texas, yep.
But like, if someone said your name, I of course know your name. Like, and I know your car, so that's
And I knew of Ninth Moto. I think when it was the white car.
Who knows, man?
I think that was the first car I saw you guys out with. I'm pretty sure it was you guys.
Could be. Let's white. There's a handful of white ones that were fairly well known.
Was it the balloon white one?
There was a balloon white Gen 3 that raced a bunch. Yeah, Felipe's car.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that was the first time I ever saw like
could be
you guys with the Viper platform. I'm pretty sure. I don't want to misrepresent if that wasn't your car. It was
definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, so on that, it's nth moto. So I'll go down that road. Yep.
Nth moto.
So nth is a play on math terms like nth degree or and it's so funny. When that name came about, you talk about irony. We at that time when the company is created, we're on our fall of 12. So we're over 10 years now, and it was this kind of joke to ourselves of like, well, everybody's got like a 3-letter acronym, right? Like ABC Performance or whatever, XYZ Racing or something. And so we're like, oh, we'll do NTH, but Moto, but it'll be nth for people that are paying attention. But then you're constantly fighting people calling it NTH now or stuff like that. So it's kind of backfired a little bit. But the Felipe's car is the one you're thinking of, and that makes sense because that car.
There's a lot of half-mile stuff, I feel like.
He didn't do a lot of half-mile, but it was a big at TI. It was at TI a whole bunch.
That's what it was, yeah.
And it ran at Texas 2K quite a few times. Ran at FL 2K quite a few times. A car is it's just a funny car in general, just because it's always like the runner-up. Like it's gotten second in so many different events so many times, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And not necessarily even to the car's fault, or even if it didn't have the performance, just however the race worked out, it ended up that time it wasn't going to happen. So
sometimes the ladder's not in your favor.
Yeah, right.
Been there quite a few times.
Yeah.
Sometimes you look at the ladder and you're like, damn it. I don't think I'll be in the finals.
If only.
We've all had that roll of the dice with the ladder.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah, most people probably the first time we would have been, I would say our kind of public debut that really kind of made a splash would have been 2013. We had a blue, solid blue 06 Viper that we debuted. Well, technically we debuted it at a half mile in Chicago, a Wanna Go Fast event they did up there. And at that point in time, I think the fastest rear-wheel drive car that had done half mile was in like the 180s or maybe 190 or something. And we went 213, and like all of a sudden we're like, oh,
Yeah.
hi.
Yeah.
And it was really cool. This beautiful car. And then we ran that one at TI for a couple of different years. And that car actually historically now, Will's wife, Rachel Dugas, owns that car now and races that car. And it's taken on more of like a drag race kind of format, even though the overall car hasn't changed much. It just has an auto now instead of a sequential. And yeah, I had a sequential back in 2013. That car, yeah, now it's the quickest Gen 3 out there. It's been 770 at 188.
It's flying still. I mean, even
Yeah, I mean, and it's something that was built, like literally, it was built in like
10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, the same headers.
Has it been updated much since? I mean, turbo technology has come a long way.
Yeah,
but
not really. No,
doesn't
it's
even
still
matter.
Not really. It's some older stuff there. It's definitely had evolutions along the way, and some of our engine updates that we've developed for them for a longevity basis. But overall.
Well, now
concept.
sevens have become very. I hate to say easy.
Yeah, I know,
I've talked to so many people,
yeah.
but you can go buy a Coyote and a Mustang and drop it off to 50 people in the state of Florida, and they'll all give you a 7-second car.
Isn't that crazy?
Pretty reliably.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
for minimal effort in a way. I mean, they're all a lot of effort and they're all a pain in the ass, but I don't know. It's crazy. But the Gen 5 car is so crazy to me because it's on 18-inch wheels in the front, like big wide wheels and stuff. Like, it does not look like it belongs going 6s at all.
Oh, and you're referencing Kratos, the silver car?
Yeah, the one that you were just
racing. That's
racing.
on 19s, actually. Yeah.
19s in the front.
Yeah,
like,
why not?
It does not look like it should be anywhere near that, which is just unreal to me. My car, you look at it and you're like, man, that thing looks like it should be going 6s, and then it doesn't even get close.
You're probably being too hard on yourself at that, but
I like to be hard on myself because, if I can't be, then nobody else should be. Yeah.
It pushes for improvement, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, no, it's I think that's something that we've tried to adhere to as a company ethos. Like, we really want to build stuff that is kind of if you could consider an OE style version of a modified car. That's kind of what we want to do. And there's several companies in the industry that do similar work like that. Not all of them run 6s or near there or something, but it's kind of I don't know. It's a neat thing. I think that was I really got a big kick when you got to see that car and you're kind of looking it over, and I think you said something like, "Man, I ruined my car to not go nearly this fast," or something like that.
Oh,
yeah, right. Like
I completely ruined a car to not go that fast. But granted, it was a 4th-gen Camaro.
Yeah.
No one cares about them at all.
Yeah. Hey,
for the most part, because they're a dime a dozen. I got that car for $1,000 with
awesome.
300,000 miles on it. So
gosh.
it was already ruined.
Right. Well, hey. Yeah.
It's lived its life.
It was the perfect candidate. Then,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
But then that thing, like, that's like a showroom quality. It's almost like, remember that show way back? It was like, I think it was Pink's, where you were trying to guess the time of a car.
Oh, yeah, right.
That car would roll up and people would be like, I don't know, like 1150s if the owner doesn't miss a gear.
Right.
Because that would be like the perception you would think.
Sure.
You would think stick shift too. When you guys switched to the Turbo 400 stuff, is that when it really escalated the platform a lot? Or was there like a big step somewhere else?
It's a really good question. And this is fun because we can kind of tell some history. We're not the most vocal company, right? And I can blame that on myself. Like, we're not super social media active or anything, and therefore we were doing a lot of things that for a long time that maybe just nobody even knows. And it doesn't make it any better because you did it whenever, but it's just like it's well vetted. So we were just joking about this in the shop the other day. The second ever Gen 5 that we did had a Turbo 400 in it. So we went straight from a TR6060 to a Turbo 400 because the customer said, hey, I want to go drag racing. And so we took this combination that...
so what year would that have been like?
It's 2015.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
early on the Turbo 400 stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, I guess I should probably know this date better. But it was either in late 15 or early 16. We basically took this combination that was a really simple to us 1500 wheel horsepower combo, put a Turbo 400 in it, and came to Bradenton, and the car went 844 at 174 or something like that. And that was like, it didn't even work right most of the pass kind of thing. Like we realized the auto thing, as much as everybody would think it's really tried and true, I mean, it is now, but you got to remember, okay, this is heavy. These things make huge peak torque. Like if you're going to put an auto in it, you don't get to run like Uncle Bobby's Turbo 400 that, for $5,000, it goes together. Like these things have, even though I don't like using the terminology because I think it's overused nowadays, but it's like pro mod level Turbo 400 that's in these things at this point. All the bells and whistles, all the big stuff, everything you can really do kind of deal. We didn't know that quite yet then. So like I blew through the band on one and didn't have enough lockup in it at some point, whatever, but it worked. And then we changed up some stuff in that car and ended up going, that was the first Gen 5 that went in the 7s ever. Then we made minor revisions to it and ended up, first in the 8s, made minor revisions and ended up being the first in the 7s. And then really nobody had any interest in going drag racing after that for a while. And then all of a sudden with that Kratos car, the silver one, we built it and we came down to Florida 2K. It won the Outlaw class in the roll race at Florida 2K. And we went, let's just come back and do a test session and see how it goes. And we, it's like, the big fish story, like, oh, my first pass kind of thing. But like legitimately we knew better, I guess, because we'd raced long enough. Like we made like some 60 foot and some 330 hits and then 1/8 mile pass. And on an 8th pass, it coasted out when like an 804 or something. We're like, oh, this is probably going to be good. And then got one full boogie pass and went 690 at 210 back then. So that was...
So it just jumped a full second right there.
Yeah. Enough that I actually didn't even believe it. Like when we came back, because, test session, I didn't see anything. Like I didn't get back till the pit area and the guys told me.
So you were driving the car at that point too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Which is not a normal thing. Don, the owner of the car, awesome guy. Like it's been a fantastic relationship with him on that car. And he's fine with, like, he can acknowledge the fact that that car's real wild when it's on the big power stuff. It actually drives super easy, like as far as like race car stuff goes.
Yeah.
And for just putzing around and driving around, it doesn't care at all. It's really, really mild mannered. But
what gearing is in the back of that?
325 numerical.
Oh wow, I didn't think it would be like that.
Yeah.
I figured that'd be a little spicier.
If you could get me a 270, I'd be happy. I mean, I guess it's just like they're torque engines, right? Like let them sit in the torque band. It's got a 30-inch tire on it just because we don't have as much RPM as everybody else that's going that fast. So, for us, we really try to...
And that thing must cruise on highway speeds like nothing.
Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah, no, cruise control works via the steering wheel buttons and all that,
Through the Motec and everything.
Yep.
Okay, people get all the creature comforts. Does that car still have AC and stuff?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
full HVAC system stock in it. It has that car was optioned factory with the 18-speaker Harman Kardon sound system. That's all in there, and fire suppression that's hidden pretty well on it. But yes, it's really got everything, man. So
not a single thing cut out. It's very similar, like how Jim's car was for a while too. We were talking to Jim at TX2K. He's got the white Mustang. Some of my viewers have seen that car a bunch on my channel, and it's very similar where you don't want to give up a single thing. And I get that. I completely respect the not giving up a single thing.
It's like, as a racer, it's dumb. Like, it's really dumb, like it's harder on everything. It's harder to get the car to work. It's harder on parts. It's harder to go as quick as what you want to. There is a little bit of like a self-satisfaction thing with it at the same time.
Sure.
So, and I personally think if you can work through a car that's, well, this isn't always entirely true, but if you work through a heavy car and you can get it to do what you need it to do, I feel like as you progress into lighter stuff, it just seems a lot easier up until a certain point. But
yeah, sometimes the heavier cars are nice because they get down the track a lot easier.
Yeah.
They don't really like blow the tires off quite as much, and then on the top end, they're not like feeling like you're in a Honda Civic, kind of bouncing all around.
Exactly. Yep.
So the heavy car is kind of nice on that point, but then parts guys also like heavy cars.
And you have to start thinking, like, at some point there's only so much power you can throw at it to fix an ET, right? Like, you really start to see that in heavy stuff because, like, you got to make a big difference in the car down track to really see an appreciable change in ET.
Yeah.
But to get
a mile an hour is easy.
Yeah, and to get a heavy car to start chipping down on that 60, like you get a lot, in my opinion, to get a lot narrower of a window to get it to start moving, because you got to hit it with some oomph to get it going. You can't really, or in our case especially, because we don't have aggressive gearing in it either, right? So you got really lazy gearing plus a heavy car. You got to get after it a little bit, but not too much, obviously, and really kind of walk that line. So I don't know. In my experience, I think it's been challenging to walk that line a little bit, but fun nonetheless.
Even with the IRS is weird too, because IRS is tricky when it does want to wheelie. It's hard to tame down the wheelie.
Sure.
Like a solid axle car, you know, when it wheelies, it's a formula.
Yeah,
you know how to like stop that.
Yep.
But you guys probably just rely on tuning for that for the most part then, right?
Yeah, mostly tuning and weight management. Yeah.
So how in depth does your, you know, Motec tuning with the traction get? Like, is it hard to make that car spin the tires on the leave?
No.
I didn't know how smart that system was, because I know like Brett's car, he's kind of told me a little bit about how he like it doesn't really spin the tires all that often.
Yeah. Like let's use Juggernaut as a good example, because that car's been 660 at 220 as an IRS car. We don't get bar angle as a change. Like it's just not there. And so your instant center's fixed, and you kind of just have to work around it, and you have to kind of know where you can get away with it. So Florida 2K this past year at Gainesville, that was actually a really interesting thing, because for us that, you know, we love coming to Bradenton. Like
it's the track.
Like we're excited to race there, right?
Yeah.
And for my time when I lived down here, Gainesville had a reputation of being a trickier track to get down, right?
Still has that reputation.
Right, yeah. So we learned that quickly that I don't think it had changed too terribly much. Although I think the crew did a killer job of like making the most of it. But we tested there, what would that have been, Thursday, whatever day prior to the event. We couldn't get down that track for the life of us, man. And so we were fine for like 80-ish feet or so. And then out any farther than that, like where we really have to apply power, but we don't have the suspension articulation to start pushing.
Yeah, you can't separate or anything. You know, that thing doesn't get all tooted up like a.
No. Sure wish it did. Yeah. But, so that was a real chore at Florida 2K to try to get that car to behave the way that we wanted it to.
It was a tricky event for a lot of people, and you guys have a lockup. I don't know if you're trying to apply it in first gear out a little ways. I don't know if I know some guys are just using it as fourth gear, which most people don't realize. It's kind of just fourth gear.
Yeah, for us, that's typically what we're doing. We've experimented with playing with it at different times and places.
Hard on parts.
Yeah, for us, so far, it hasn't been appreciable to make that change. I could see it where you could, if you were real tricky with it and you got yourself away with running real loose on the converter and then use the clutch to bind it up when you want it to. For us, because that engine makes so much torque, when I say so much torque, like, you know, so that car, Juggernaut, I think the last time we dynoed that, it made 31 or 3,200 something wheel. It makes 2,800 pound-feet of torque, and it'll do it from like 5,800 to 7,200 or so. So if you are spinning that thing heavy and you lock it and bind it down into that, you know, upper 5,000 RPM range, that's it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Real quick, all of a sudden it gets real knock happy. So you gotta be.
And as a knock, you mean like
detonation.
Detonation.
Yeah, right.
Right,
Yeah. You can start
not engine knock. Like,
right. Yeah. You when you have that rate of change so quickly, even on one ethanol, which has been great for us as far as like power per cylinder and being safe on that stuff, you just got to be careful. Like it's like if you get into marine tuning, when you see when the prop starts to chop in the water and come in and out, you get those the real quick engine oscillation up down type things, or in off-road applications where you get the hit when the tire gets back down to the ground. Those are really fast happening potential danger situations for the engine. So for us, we're I guess maybe we're just too conservative, but like we really don't want to hurt the motors as much as we can. Part of what you're talking about with like how good the cars look, and thank you, and the guys at the shop put unbelievable hours into doing that. It also takes unbelievable hours to work on them then, so it's not like we're trying to go race car racing, not a good idea.
Yeah.
But
You heard a cylinder head at TX2K.
Done.
It's on the trailer.
Put it away. Yeah,
There's a lot of cars out there that like, oh, cylinder head, I can make next round.
yeah, or guys, oh, we put bearings in it overnight. Like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, nope, not us.
That's the double-edged sword on that one.
Yeah. So it's you can make them look beautiful, but they're not very easy to work on at that
Yeah,
point.
I'm gonna move this a little closer.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Yep.
Figured I'd bring it a little closer. Yeah, so you kind of also, with the V10 platform, there's not many that you can put a Turbo 400 behind. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of other V10 cars out there running around, but they're kind of limited to what they can do.
Yeah.
And then, with your standalone stuff, you don't have to control a transmission that's, hyper intelligent that needs learning clutches and all that stuff. So you
Yeah.
guys kind of get the good side of it there. But you've worked
Yeah.
on all V10s, right?
Yeah. I mean, so my past, going back, I was super fortunate when I used to live in Florida. I used to work for Jason at Hefner
Right around here.
Performance. Yeah, right. Yeah, right in Sarasota.
I think he lives like around
Oh
here.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Actually, he doesn't know him in town right now, but usually we stop in and say hi to him and Linnell, and we still got a really fantastic relationship, which I really love. But I came down and worked for Jason right at basically kind of the transition time. That was fall of 2007 when I moved down and started working here, and that was right as. Yeah, I was a Chrysler kid. Like my family's all been Chrysler all their life, kind of thing. So Vipers were like the thing, and that's
Yeah.
Hefner Performance Vipers, awesome. And we got there, and there was like 2 Vipers in the shop or something, and a sea of Ford GTs and Lambos. And you're like, oh, okay. So it shifted very quickly, but yeah, we got. Jason. If I'm quoting my history correct, he was the first to do a twin turbo Gallardo way back in the day. I was even up in. When he was up in Maryland originally, I believe. But anywho, yeah, we were really heavy into those markets. He was phasing out of Viper stuff at that point in time. And aside from a couple of small projects, or well, actually some larger projects, but selective projects is maybe the right word at that point. Other than that, it was all Ford GT and Gallardo, Audi R8, stuff like that at that point in time. And then when the LP series came out, and then when I decided to step away from that and do something different, I frankly, out of respect to him, I didn't want to do that and be kind of anywhere near the marketplace that we were already doing and anywhere near physically to here. So I guess I moved pretty far away at that point
Yeah,
to
I
Minnesota.
think you're in a different market.
Yeah,
for
right,
sure.
right. So,
But with those cars, it kind of doesn't matter because people ship them anywhere.
Yeah.
Once you're talking a $200,000 car, those guys will send it to wherever they think they'll get the right
that's true.
work done.
There's no doubt about that. But I'm from Michigan originally, so going back up to the Midwest was like I was happy to do that.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I love it down here, and even when I'm down here on vacation, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this. This is pretty great. The roads are so smooth and all of that.
So hot.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's 80s and it's 20s at home maybe right
track
now.
open every day.
Right. So there's a lot of advantages to that, especially in the marketplace that we're in. But
But you decided not to do the Lambo stuff, even though, you were everything there, right? You were wiring Lamborghinis, you were fabricating on them, you were tuning on them. Like what?
yeah,
What kind of stuff were you doing back then when you first started to kind of cut your teeth, I guess you would say?
Sure. My primary role at Hefner was fabricator. So I did the majority of the production work and then the prototyping work on when we were developing new systems and such. I did end up migrating into doing a good bit of the ECU tuning work, and I want to just be careful about that so I don't try to make it sound like, hey, I did all this cool stuff. Like
Yeah.
Jason, I learned so much from him in those years, and I'm still eternally grateful for that experience. But I did end up doing a good bit of ECU work, which I was doing prior to coming to Hefner. But obviously, you're not just going to hand the kids over to what more or less amounted to a pretty young kid at that point in time, and hey, just have at this turbo Lambo, So that took some time to kind of work my way into that and convince that I was capable of doing as such. But that is what it ended up being. That I was doing a good bit of that, and we even actually, that was the type of relationship that we had. That we were working on what ended up being the first 8-second Gallardo, is this Grigio Telesto, I think, if I'm correct, the battleship gray color Superleggera. And it was this it was this real special project that we had decided, like, hey, we're gonna go drag racing, which nobody's doing, so it'd be so cool. And we threw out the rule book of like, forget this E-gear stuff and blah blah blah. So we put a Hollinger sequential in the car and put a cool dash in it, put it on Motec, and really took our existing engine program that we had and a slightly larger turbo configuration. I mean, I think if I can remember back in time, and hopefully Jason doesn't care that I'm saying it now, but I'm pretty sure it was a, I think that was just a 67 mil combo that we went to. It wasn't even like big by today's standards or anything.
I mean, 67's tiny.
Yeah, right. But we just did a better intercooler design. We moved the oil, or I think we moved the oil tank or modified the oil tank maybe. Just did more than what, those cars actually, again, hopefully nobody gets mad. They're not that hard to build a turbo system on, to the extent that like you pull this giant exhaust system off, and like, so physically building a turbo system on those cars is not challenging.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few, and if you don't run the bumper on the back, man, they're just
I guess you can do,
right there.
You can do whatever you want to do then, right? But even if you restrain yourself to like, oh, the exhaust has got to go back where it was, it's like, oh, okay, look at all this space for activities, so like,
and all the heat's way back there.
Yeah. So, but understanding the intricacies of the engine and the electronics and the fuel system, that was the trick in getting the driveline to live.
What were you tuning on back then with like ECU wise? What was?
So, depending on the car build, they were either on an AEM, be it even, in the original days, there were AEM Series 1 ECUs that were running on those cars, and then AEM Series 2s eventually, and then there were Motecs, but in the grand, most of them were all a fairly, this word gets misconstrued sometimes, but they were basically a piggyback system, but varying levels of integration at that point in time. And that's not to make that even sound bad, right? It was like, how do you control this thing but keep all the OE functionality to the vehicle? And you got pretty creative, and some of those were fairly intense integration projects to like control as much as what we wanted to, but keep the OEM car happy at the same time.
Was that pre-CAN bus stuff?
Yeah.
So it was a little more analog, I guess.
Yeah,
because now
correct.
the CAN bus even makes it. I don't know if makes it harder for everyone.
Well, yeah,
it's kind of the
right.
Some people were like, "Oh, I like it.
Yeah,
I can read it and control it. I see what's coming in." But then some people, it's just right over their head.
Yeah, I'll call it a love-hate relationship.
Yeah.
So
they're not all the same.
Yeah, there's some of that for sure. Excuse you for a moment.
No, you're good.
But yeah, so they were like advanced piggyback cars basically.
Yeah.
But yeah. So we had 2 months before we knew that we were leaving, and we like promised Jason that we would help finish that car, and because it was very much, it was actually myself and Zach, another guy who worked there with me, that had moved down, and we ended up working there together. We both left at the same time and moved away to do Nth Moto, and that car was kind of our baby at that point. Like, we really wanted to get through that
like
thing.
A big project, kind of a big shop name,
Absolutely.
like kind of put it on the map.
Yeah, absolutely.
All shops kind of need that.
Yeah,
and big shop car that puts them on the map more. I mean,
Yep.
Jason was already established at the time, but
He was, but like, let's call a spade a spade. Like, Underground did a phenomenal job marketing themselves to
Yes.
that crowd, and phenomenal job performing. Right, like they built fast stuff.
Yeah.
And we at Hefner had, I'm not even going to say this in like in a negative way. Like, we had really stayed the course of like what Jason originally wanted to do with those cars and how he wanted them to be done, and that worked great for the business. Like, there was no qualms there, but there was a pride element that like we as the shop wanted to like show, like, hey, we can do this, okay?
Yeah.
And that was the car that we could do that with. So then to all of a sudden we went out to Bradenton, and like I think it was just a matter of passes, and it went. I should have known this. 874 to 169, maybe something like that. I don't know. Which at the time was like, oh my gosh, a Lamborghini went 870. And now you see when at the track, if you see a Lambo or an R8 pull up and it doesn't go 780, you're like, oh, that's weird. What's wrong with that one? You know, it's like it's crazy what has like happened to the
I think
performance landscape.
once the Huracan came out, it just like it made everything else so obsolete seeming though.
Yeah,
like
wild.
it's like you see a twin turbo Gallardo out there racing, and you're just like, eh.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
Why?
Or it's like retro. You're like, oh, do you remember when those were cool?
Yeah.
Man, that's neat. Like, how sad is that? How jaded have we become?
So sad, because the Huracan is just so much better. It seems that even the transmissions and everything, and Motec opened them up for everybody can tune them, and that was kind of the floodgates. Now there's 2,000 shops that build Lamborghinis, so and it used to be 10.
Ironically, like we did a 17 R8 Plus, like we did a nice, call it that generation car. Kind of stay true to our course. We did this really cool carbon airbox. We did billet CNC intercooler end tanks, and it was a beautiful system layout. And we did development of driveline pieces and all that, and it was a really cool car, right? That car had a Syvex on it because Motec didn't exist yet for that application, and we didn't want to be stuck with the stock ECU stuff. So went through that, didn't want to learn something new, but did it anyways. And that was a cool project for us to do as a company at Nth. But that was right about the time that all of a sudden the release of the plug and play Motec system was around the corner.
Yeah.
And as a business, we looked at that and said, I don't think we want to do that. Like I feel like it's going to turn into a lot of people getting into that stuff. And I'm not saying that we made the right decision, because that market blew up exponentially, but at the same time, like Viper has treated us extremely well. So I'm not mad about our decision tree, but it's just, it did come true what we kind of expected. It ended up that like, man, you got a lot of companies that are doing those cars that maybe they're almost too easy to make fast. So unfortunately, I think that can lead down a bad path for a customer sometimes, that maybe people get in over their head a little bit.
Well, when you can buy an off-the-shelf twin turbo kit for a Lamborghini is crazy.
It's a weird statement to say, right?
Crazy, like off-the-shelf stuff. Like AMS has a great turbo kit that
awesome.
you could just buy.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, I've seen it perform really well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
And Vipers aren't like that, which is cool because it makes them that more unique.
Yeah.
It's weird to say a twin turbo Lamborghini isn't unique. But
I know.
Go to TX2K and you'll realize that they're not as unique as you think.
I'm pretty sure on the way here I passed one. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like it's just and they're amazingly cool. They're extremely gratifying, and the performance envelope is just unreal, right? Like, because they'll go fast on like any surface, and they'll do it with pretty much any skill level driver in the car, which is both amazing and terrifying. And I give so much credit to that. However, what's been so interesting from a business standpoint is we see a lot of people get into that, and they love it. They really love it, but it wears off. It's almost like guys who have the Plaid, right? Like people get it and they're like, "Oh, this thing is so cool and
Launch
awesome."
it 20 times.
Yeah, and then it's for sale, right? Because it's like the panache wears off. It's like, well, I've done that, and it does the same thing every time, and that's super cool the first 77 times, and then like after that, you're kind of
showed everyone you know.
Yeah, right.
They're all impressed now.
Yeah, so we see that as a company. We see that kind of happen in the R8 or Huracan market, and it's not that those guys like fire sale a car or anything, but all of a sudden they come looking for something that's more engaging, and that's what Viper is for us. Like you make a pass in one of those cars, and there's gratification that happens afterwards. Like you accomplish something. You are a part of making that car run what it ran, and you're also equally a part of when it doesn't run what it's supposed to run. Like it's oftentimes you that made that happen.
Yep.
So for those of us that are driven by self-improvement, right? Like when you talk about the car and like building it from what it begins as, like if you love that self-improvement thing, Viper's a really, really cool car in that marketplace because it pushes you to do better. Because you feel it make a little better pass that time. You're like, oh yeah, I hit my shift point better, and I was more true to keeping steady, and whatever the case may be. It's a rewarding driving experience, is what our customer base ends up finding.
And you can actually go into like a class and race that thing with a normal tree, like a normal drag racer.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to do some weird thing because you got dual clutch trans. You have to only race other people with dual clutch trans. Like you have a bump box, you got a trans brake. It's a real race car, but it's also this refined supercar that sits with those cars, but then also can kind of sit with the street car guys, which
it's in this weird little land, right?
Yeah, it's like this island of itself, basically.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
And there's I think it's really only like 3 Vipers that ever come drag racing. It's you guys with the 2 and then Ned.
Yeah, right. And we'd love to see more. I mean, obviously you've got Sal that went 6s like 40 years
Ever
ago,
ago,
and that's
yeah.
me making fun of his age. Hi, Sal, love you. But we built a Gen 5 for him recently,
Yep.
so we can.
And that's the black one, right?
The black Gen 2 car.
And then there was the purple one too that was
Yep,
racing
yep,
forever
Rohan's
ago.
car, yeah.
I think his son was driving. The black one, his son was
the black
driving.
one, yeah, and that's Millen. And so I never want to race against Millen on a tree because he's like unbelievably quick and consistent.
His son?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, it's like brutal.
I think he was like
Brutally good.
17 years old at World Cup
Yeah.
racing that thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Good for him. That's awesome.
Yeah, and so I got to the cool story about that. I was gonna say not to drag this on, but I guess we're supposed to be here to talk,
Hey,
right?
that's what we're doing.
But
If it's a good story, I want to hear it.
we built a Gen 5 for Sal. So it's a cool car, the snakeskin green special edition ACR. So it's anyways, this snakeskin green with this cool
Rare
stripes.
car.
And
You
whatever.
see that thing from 10 miles away.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah, an attention getter.
Yeah.
Not always a good thing, but it that started as like, hey, I want to build a Gen 5, and like let's I think the original build we were supposed to like try to make like 1,700 with it or something like that, and
No, just 17.
yeah, it's like it's I feel
It's an entry level car on
it's
that.
crazy
yeah.
to say that, but I mean it's pretty. That's not difficult at this point. And
You have the formula.
yeah, and so you can say that, and then scope creep came in as scope creep does, and then you've got a guy who literally is the guy that like pioneered Viper drag racing. I'll go as far as to say that because honestly, like nobody. I mean, I think his car. I'm pretty sure he was the first car to run sixes on an IRS. Period, regardless of like platform. He and then Steve Drummond, the shop that he ended up aligning with, that car was originally a Hefner turbo car. And then Sal was local to Steve, and Steve kind of started taking over on it and being a drag race oriented guy. And then Sal is an incredibly educated and intelligent man pertaining to cars, like going fast, doing his
Yeah.
own tune work. He was doing chip burning and C4 Corvettes and all that kind of stuff. So he's a really switched on guy, and they ended up really pushing that platform to get where they did. And then there was no one to go racing with that wanted to really do it at that point in time.
When was this around though?
So that car went sixes in I believe it was 2009.
Holy crap.
Yeah,
That's
right. And in like all the things that we think are really cool now, it was doing that. Like it was heavy then.
Yeah.
I think it was like 3,800 pounds then.
You rarely hear about these people that were like doing it way back and they were like, well, I already treaded that territory.
Right.
Where are you guys at?
That car was basically like retired forever, right? And then all of a sudden we came along with Will's car with Juggernaut, and he was like excited, like, yeah, all right, like here's something to do. So that was probably one of the coolest racing experiences I've ever had is when we did Hail Mary Derby up there, and that car was there and Juggernaut was there, and that was when we and you couldn't tell the story any more dramatically. Like it's not nearly as cool of a story as Ford versus Ferrari, but like if anybody needs an idea for a cool movie, like we built this car with the intent of like we want to be the quickest and fastest IRS Viper out there, and the quickest and fastest one shows up at that race and like to try to be there. Granted, his intent was to get Millen seat time in the car, not like, hey, let's go run as quick as we ever have. Yeah, right. Like that was not part of the program, but racers being racers, I'm sure that was in the back of their mind a little bit.
You gotta be thinking it.
Yeah, but we ended up running a 696 with a 3, which was to the 3 exactly what Sal had ran to be that record-holding car. And then we went up for another pass, and then went I think a 689 on the next pass or something like that. So, and he knew it, like, and that was such a cool interaction to see both of those teams at that point kind of like cheering each other on. It was like, it reminded me like, man, this is what we do this stuff for. Like, this is the camaraderie that can be there, which I think, I'm going to sound like I'm on a soapbox now. I feel like social media has ruined so much of that sometimes, that like it's this such powerful tool, but it's made so many people so hard on each other for needlessness in some cases.
Yeah.
But that was an instance with two completely separate teams, more or less, and groups of people that supported those cars, really congratulating each other as each one made a good pass and kind of blow for blow type thing, to a point that we did a bunch of photos together with the two cars at the end of the day. And that was a really cool thing, man.
Yeah, like guys that were just excited to see the sport grow.
Yeah.
Because that's what I want to see.
Right.
At least, like, my goal is, Bradenton always packed. That's
Yeah.
my hope.
Yeah.
That is
Yep.
the hope for the next 5 years, is that track is always crowded.
Absolutely, man.
And that's what we all have to kind of think about. And Hail Mary Derby was a great one that Jason Miller did, because that was middle of COVID where nobody could go
Right.
to World Cup.
Yep.
So he kind of did that in between race deal, just
Yeah.
for a little reference, I guess, for people.
Sure.
Yeah.
That worked out well. No, and not to deter, because the Sal story, I got to finish out on that. But like guys like yourselves deserve so much credit. And I say yourselves, I'm grouping you into the personalities that people watch on the internet now. When I say people, I mean the youth, right? Like the youth
Yeah.
of this sport are watching guys like you, and the other numerous, internet personalities out there and whatnot. And that's awesome because, and it's funny because I watched guys like yourself, or obviously Garrett and those guys. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you see the sea of people that like are swarming you guys all the time, which on one hand, I look at it and go, man, God bless you. Like I couldn't do that, right? Like I don't think I could focus on what I'm trying to do and have that going on at the same time. And I'm sure you guys catch some negativity. The internet is negative in so many ways all the time, right? But you see people talking about like, oh, the popularity is just popularity or whatever. But like, I think people lose sight of the fact that you guys are helping grow the culture that we all love, right? Like we all started in this, like this is my career, but it was a hobby. Like I started because I loved cars and we were street racing and we were doing things like that. And all of a sudden it was like, well, man, maybe we can make a living off of this, right? So I'm genuinely sitting across here saying thank you to you and all the other guys out there that are helping promote this as a thing, right?
It's a weird thing to hear, and it's like I understand what we're doing, and that's my hope, is to inspire. Not really, I don't really care all that much to build like, oh, like all these people are like loyal fans. I want to inspire them to come out here and put me on the trailer first round.
Yeah, right.
Like that's what my hope is. Like I want to.
That's
like,
awesome.
People see me show up. It's just me and my wife. We go racing. Like it's not 10 people. It's an open trailer. Like I want to inspire. Like it's not as difficult as maybe it looks to some people. It's we're two
you can
people.
do this too, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's my hope, is to actually inspire instead of just like only have fans, I guess. And that's where it kind of is a balance.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I hope that that's the end goal, because
Well, I think you guys are doing it. Like, and I'll say you are doing it. And I'm tipping my hat to everybody in a general blanket statement, because like the sport needs more of whatever it is that brings attention to the sport in a positive way. Whatever it is that gets more people into it, that gets like, beyond my business side of it, like I want that, because this culture is anybody that I talk to now. I mean, I have my best friend from high school, Tony. We met over cars, right? Like, I mean, my brother had a Stealth twin turbo and he really wanted one. He had like Grand Prix GTP back then. And like we met in honors English class over like, oh, you're the guy that comes in the Stealth, or you're the guy in the, like stuff like that, right? Like I'm sure you have tons of relationships that are developed based on, oh, you're the guy with the so-and-so car, right?
pretty much everybody I know now is people I've met at the track.
Right.
It's kind of the only people I talk
Right?
to now.
Yeah, no. So that's what I'm saying. It's like you, and that it's stemmed into a career, right? And like it's a livelihood. But that all started with a passion for the hobby. And I think that's really cool that you guys are like helping make that happen.
Yeah, it's a fun thing, and I don't have kids right now, and I plan to have kids, and I want them to be able to
Greatest
go
thing ever,
and
by the way.
enjoy cars. And I'm sure you think the same thing. Like you want them to be able to enjoy this hobby and actually be able to go out and enjoy it, and that's kind of what we're all hoping for with the future.
Sure. My dad was he loves this story, and he was telling it today, because our little boy is 19 months. He's passed out asleep next to my dad at their house in Michigan, and the main road out in front, he said they were sitting there and it was quiet, and some car makes a beep pass out on the road, and he hears it go through the gears, and he says our child just wakes up and points and goes, car? And like, just like, and that's it. Like that was what woke him up.
Not even 2 years old yet? Already
Oh yeah. No, it's like, I swear it's not purposely trained that way, but like it's, no, it is definitely neat. So when you guys get to that point, it's the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, that's what I'm excited for, to share the hobby and force somebody else to, the wife doesn't always want to listen to me talk about cars.
Oh yeah,
so
right.
The kids kind of have to.
Yeah, they're going to want to.
Yeah, you can kind of force them into listening to the cars.
Yeah.
You groom them into it.
Right. So
You're gonna be a car person.
yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be great. Look,
Yeah.
look how broke you can get. Oh wait, no, don't think about that.
So everybody knows you for the Vipers, but what other platforms are you interested in? Like if somebody came to you right now and was like, "Hey, I got this 911 Turbo or
That's
this."
funny you say that.
What other platforms would you get excited about?
Yeah.
that you would love to dive into.
So, that's a great question. It's a not entirely finished answer either. So there's two, but probably the two main segues. We're really getting more involved in like real race car stuff, and not just car, right? So like recently we went and did some snowmobile stuff, and that was a really, really cool experience, something we're going to be doing a lot more of going forward. And I mean like think Pro Mod,
Yeah.
but
Big
snowmobile.
turbo.
This was a twin screw, nitromethane Hayabusa motor, makes around 1,100 horsepower, weighs 480 pounds or something. Like just cool stuff.
And what are they, like 330 race those or?
500 foot.
500
foot, and they go low threes.
Oh wow.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
Yeah.
On snow
Yeah.
and ice.
Snow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ice is fast because it's all its hook, right? Snow is like the no prep version of snowmobile racing because literally you got to look at the snowpack, like how
Yeah.
dense is it, how tight is it, how wet
Completely
is it.
rewires
Like,
your brain.
yeah, it's really
from
funny.
racing to
yeah.
like.
So I'm there for my first time at this race and watching the starting line and kind of learning and watching some of these guys dig 6 inches down before they really get some forward progress, and kind of seeing and thinking like a radial, like you got to treat it like a radial car almost in that case, or as all the pro racers finished the event. It's funny, everyone picks up the stakes, and that racing channel did a killer video on the Snow Outlaws event. We actually bumped into them up there. So Javier and those guys,
Oh,
I
yeah,
came out of a trailer and they're like, "Oh, hey, what are you doing here?" But they did a cool video on it, so you can kind of get a feel for that. But after the pro racing, everybody picks up. It'd be like if you're out at night at
They
Bradenton.
cleaned up the whole track.
Yeah, it's like think that they shut down the boards and like everyone goes away, and now like the hooligans come out of the woodwork and they start running on the track instead, and there's nobody taking care of the track anymore. So it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse as it goes on. And so you had these like side by side flashlight, very nicely groomed surface racers, and then when that's over, all these sleds start coming over. I mean, they'd be 10 or 15 wide doing arm drop races. And as the starting line would get chewed, they'd just move another 10 feet forward, 10 feet forward. And it was like you watched street racing happen, because you'd see some guys come up in a sled that looks very trail setup or whatever, but it's got like a thump idle and a turbine wheel whiz and a dump pipe coming out the side, and it's launching off a two-step, and like, so you saw like sleepers. Anyways, I was really excited about it. Anyways.
Yeah, that's super cool. And so you were able to plug a laptop into those and play around on them?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yep.
Did you find, because I find this in the side-by-side world, people don't tune them like a car. They think that there's something different. Like they think like the engine, they're like, oh no, this is different. But it's like, they're an engine. Yeah. And I feel like people try to treat everything differently, even like with boats.
Yeah.
People try to treat them all differently.
I wouldn't disagree with that. Yeah. The guys that that we were brought in by to help with that, the company that built the Sled Hyper Sports, they're kind of the guys that build all the really bad boy, big fast ones. They were really open arms to kind of like, hey, this is what we've done and this is what we've tried and this is where we're headed. And they're just swamped. They had, they got like one guy that does calibration support. And bless his heart, he's got 6 or 7 really serious sleds there, plus 20 other guys that are running their engines and other sleds. And there's an hour between rounds. And so like they're yeah, right. You can't do it. Yeah. So that was a big part of why we came into that. They're a really good group of guys. We gave a little bit of insight of what we saw that maybe could be improved upon, and that's what we're going to do next time out. But sorry, I got sidetracked there. You were asking about like what would we do different?
Yeah,
what
other platforms does it kind of pique your interest?
Yeah, I really want to. I mean, I love drag racing. I want to keep doing more down the road of like some real dedicated drag stuff, which we do some support for ATIs, some of their race cars. But you got that on the car side of things. Porsche really has my interest. I got to drive a GT3 RS when I was doing a customer visit, and it was a pretty eye-opening experience for me. Really, really cool car. I had never driven one of those before, and it was kind of like a all right, I get this. Like I see what people are saying about these cars.
Get into a 911 turbo.
Yeah,
Man.
yeah. I have driven one from actually Will Dugas. They had one that was done up pretty nicely, and it was a really cool driving experience. I could see where there's some neatness to that, and I could see where maybe we could apply a little bit of nth motoism to it, and like, hey, we could do that a little different. So maybe, but aside from that, there's not a lot of stuff that's like really pulling at my heartstrings right now, and a lot of that is like, what is there that is the evolutionary step from Viper? Like, there's nothing that really is like that.
I don't think there's a step up. Maybe it's like a horizontal or like even somewhat. I mean, the C8 market's pretty big, but those are kind of meh for going real fast. I don't think we're gonna see any 6-second C8s.
Probably not.
I'd hate to say ever, but
Yeah, no, I mean, that'd be cool.
Unlikely that we're
I'd
gonna
give them
see
a high five when they do
6-second
it.
C8.
Yeah,
It just doesn't seem likely.
yeah.
But maybe somebody will put like an R8 transmission and motor in them, and they'll go fast.
Right. Yeah.
A Motec.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'd be curious. We ask our customers sometimes, like, hey, what other stuff are you guys into? Not, we've got we have an awesome customer base of just hardcore car enthusiasts that love to do this stuff.
Yeah.
And that makes them so great to work with for us. But they're not brand loyal either. They're all over the place in the different stuff that they like. And so we get some good feedback from that. But if anything, Viper as a platform has increased in popularity in the last 3 years, and it's sad because the production's over, but now people are like clamoring to get their hands on them because like the word has finally gotten out, like, hey, these are cool, and if you want it cooler, these guys can do whatever kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but I guess to point blank on it, like Porsche would probably be where I would maybe look at, and I could see that being a cool market to play around in.
Yeah, I don't know where else we're going with like racing. Like if you're actually trying to drag race something that's like more on the supercar level of like that kind of cool.
I don't know, man. I almost think you got to go back. You got to go the other direction, like more resto mod style stuff, or maybe modernization of older chassis build outs and stuff. Like, I mean, kind of, it's funny in that the original Facebook thread we were talking about the engine, like how many people are like, oh, you need to build a RVW Viper or something, or, go build a 275 car or something like that. Yes. Like, I mean, just.
There's one floating around for sale, like one Viper chassis car that's I keep seeing pop up every now and then.
Yep. Yeah.
It looks like a pretty serious hot rod, but it's been for sale for a while.
Yeah.
It's like an RVW car almost.
I'm pretty familiar with that car from back in the day, and I don't necessarily know why it hasn't traded hands yet at this point in time, but I think I guess if there's one thing we've learned really, really heavily over the last probably 4 to 5 years is taking over on someone else's project is not something we really have a lot of interest in doing. And it's not just us being picky. It's like, it's not good for the customer because even if that car was done like really, really super, super nicely, we might just have a different view of how we would want to do it. And if it's going to represent our brand now and you want to call it an Nth Moto car, then we're going to want to redo it. So then that means whatever you paid for it is just kind of null and void now, right? So those situations can end up being really tricky because we don't want to make it expensive to the customer for the fun of it. That's not a good idea for long-term relationship.
And you guys touch everything on a car.
Yeah,
you're not just slapping a turbo kit on it and sending it down the road.
Yep. So that's a really challenging thing for us, and especially I really feel bad for the Viper market as a whole sometimes because there'll be guys that contact us like, hey, I picked up this car. It's got this and this and this and this. I really want you guys to get in and tune it. And I'm not going to say that we don't ever do it, haven't ever done it, or won't ever do it again. But man, it's a tough road sometimes because you see some stuff that is not good, right? And and something should be done about it. But then something that you had allotted a week or 2 weeks of schedule time for turns into a 3 or 4 month like blow it all apart and start over project. Now, now your schedule's messed up. Now the customer's probably not happy with somebody. It might not be you, but somebody's, you made somebody unhappy, and that ended up way more expensive. And at the end, did they really get what they wanted, or would it have been smarter to just start clean slate?
Yeah,
at
and
that
you
point in
fall
time?
into like the trying to be a good shop owner, people pleaser level in a way. A lot of shops turn people away like nothing, but like, you don't always want to do that. You want to help people.
Yeah. Because I know we know what we're doing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know we're educated in the platform very much so. And I know that we probably couldn't figure out whatever it is that's going on with the car. Admittedly, we've also been burned by that a couple of times. And unfortunately, that bad taste doesn't wear away easily, right? So you get the short end of the stick on that enough times, and you go, man, I'm sorry, it's just not worth getting involved in again.
Yeah, it can be a toxic environment in the car world sometimes because it's so small.
Yeah, right.
It can easily be toxic
Yeah.
because it's a tight-knit group of people.
Yeah.
But you did touch on building a Viper engine into like an actual race car,
Yeah, that'd
like
be cool.
some kind of Fox body or RVW car, of course, would be awesome. It doesn't have to be a Viper,
Yeah.
but if it has a Viper power plant
Yeah.
and your twin turbo kit, you can put the turbos wherever you want at that point. And how interested in that are you?
Very.
How much thinking do you?
A lot of thinking, yeah. Well, how could you not, right? So we look at this and say, all right, go back to our stupid little spec sheet comparison thing, right? We say, okay.
We'll do some bench racing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because that's always good. We're on a nice bench.
Yeah,
here too,
exactly.
Right?
We'll do some bench racing.
So you got a 4,000-pound car that goes sixes with a mid 120 60 foot, so not even like fast, right?
Yeah.
And an engine combination like that, driveline combination, all of that, like we've done health checks at around 75 hits at over let's just say over 3,000 horsepower, and the stuff looks real good.
So like a health check, like bearings out.
Yeah,
that
like
kind of thing.
like because we own and
Thrust
operate our
bearing
own
check.
engine machine shop as part of our company, so we can do that. B, it's good practice for something that you're kind of pushing the envelope on of like, okay, what are we seeing that is good or bad, right?
Yeah.
We're at a point right now that all signs are kind of telling us like, try more. I don't know, and that sounds cool up until it's not. But
You've got to find that point of.
Yeah. Again, it's different because like it's not like we're in the business of wanting to spit stuff out every time, right? Like we don't want to do that, and it's not necessarily in the customer's best interest because we have to remember that like what do they want to accomplish with the car, right? So take that 4,000-pound car and like just take 1,000 pounds out of it, make it 3,000.
Make it 60 foot.
Make it like really 60 foot, like a real
112.
car. Yeah, sure. Yeah,
I
a
mean,
bad pass for a car in that level.
Yeah,
like,
you look at like what LaSala did, like
Sure.
his upgrade. Take 800 pounds off of his car and make it 60 foot harder.
right.
Kind of
Ta-da!
the same deal. Yeah.
And durability, right? Like if you've been running that engine program at a heavier weight,
Yep.
making it work harder to do the same duty, but now you just make its life easier. What kind of longevity do you get out of that? Because that's like race cars are fun, right? But race cars are not as much fun if you're working on race cars all the time. I'm not trying to like claim
Racing is fun. Working on race cars, it gets less fun. Yeah.
right. So if we could do something to where we're not in a maintenance cycle situation like I don't want to say a lot of guys, but like the guys that are like fast, it's not uncommon to hear them talking about tossing bearings at it over the weekend, or like they get 2 race weekends out of it and then they're just going to take it apart. And maybe it's just good practice, right? But like in some cases that's like the routine. That's just what they're used to doing.
Some shops take those engines apart more than they let on to believe as well.
Sure, there's no doubt about that.
There's
Yeah.
that side of things,
Yep.
of course. I mean, not all shop owners are trying to publicize their failures like a YouTuber.
Totally. Yep.
Like I'm completely open with failures
Right.
because it's part of what I have to do.
Yeah.
But some shop owners don't have to.
Yeah. Yep. And so I guess we're kind of looking at it as saying like, I just think it would be really cool, and I think we could have a pretty darn competitive combination with a completely off-the-wall combination compared to everyone else, and you're still handcuffed with the fact that you're on OEM-based stuff, right? So it's not like you whittled out your own engine out of a block of aluminum and that's awesome. Like that's great.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're working with here. So I don't know. Yeah, that would be very cool.
So you said you have your own machine shop too. So like,
Yeah.
you didn't want to just go to somebody that builds engines and be like, "Hey, can you build us our Viper engine?" You were like, "I would rather have complete autonomy over my control of my engine program."
Yes. Now it didn't start life like that, right? Like
I would imagine, yeah.
We developed a relationship with an engine builder, and had great success with that for a number of years, to a point that like we basically figured out, we came to the realization that we as an entity were, I don't remember the numbers completely, I think we were around 60% of their business at that point in time. So it started to look like, okay, well, and the current owner of that business at that time was actually going through a situation where the city was, I can't think of the word. I don't know why it escapes me at the moment, but basically they were purchasing that property that they were on for road expansion.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was an opportunity that basically he was like, look, I'm going to keep doing the car stuff, but the engine machine stuff I don't really want to do. So we purchased the entire engine machine shop, inclusive of the engine builder, Clay, and brought him as part of our umbrella. And then so that just became under our roof. Then we had our own engine machine shop. And so we didn't change anything. It was
you just like absorbed one.
Yeah, right.
And it already had your program. It already, yeah.
Exactly. We had already developed that relationship and all of what we needed to do. And then it just made it that much easier because then we were just right there with each other. And so it's neat. We get to, Nth Engines basically gets to sustain life off of Nth Moto business. And then we get to do cool projects that we want to be a part of on there, which we do a good bit of marine engines for guys, and a handful of really cool things.
Yeah, I was going to say, what other kind of engines get to come through there? Then I know my machine shop who builds my engines. There's McLaren engines in there, Viper engines, and Coyote engines.
Okay.
They build all the fast Coyote stuff too, so I get to just kind of
peruse a little.
I get to hop on that. Yeah, I put my little 2J next to all
there
these
you go.
big motors.
Right. Hey, it's just as long, right?
Yeah,
so you got that going for you.
It's pretty much the same length as a V10 on the Viper.
Yep.
But I couldn't believe how big that Viper was. And then there's like this McLaren motor right next to it, and it's like this. It's
cute
tiny.
little guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they were trying to go for like, I think 1,500 with this McLaren motor. Yeah.
Right on.
So that seems like a pretty cool platform.
Sounds like a really cool engine. That does not sound like fun to get the drivetrain to work at that point.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
And McLaren stuff is a nightmare to begin with.
You know, the fear there is like, and just speaking openly on like the business side of it, I think those are amazingly cool cars. Like I love efficiency. Like that's, you know, our intercooler end tanks. Like, could we make those by hand? Yes. Would they work just as well? No. Would they look as good? No. And I'm a metal fabricator, and like I'm not gonna make it as good as that, right?
Yeah. So your intercoolers, for reference, are CAD designed. They like fit perfectly in the engine bay. They look like they flow air. Like I don't even know, like aircraft grade. They look.
Yeah, I mean they're built to make use of the entirety of the core as best we can. So that way that intercooler is working at what we would basically think is our best potential case at that point in time. And to us, that's worth the investment at that point to do it that way. So it's.
So do you design that stuff? Like.
Yeah, as far as our company wise, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know if like how in depth you go into the CAD stuff.
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah.
You have a guy for it.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be the guy that's like, I know how to do everything. Absolutely not. But we do have members of our team that do CAD design work, and then we also have some really great relationships with some outside guys that really have just been long-term friends of ours that have come into like doing this. And then we do not own our own machinery, but another friend of mine in the machining industry, basically, like he has opened his own business almost based on the fact that we give him enough business to sustain business from. So it's been really cool to see other companies grow. I'm not going to say directly because of us, but we're definitely a helping hand to that. So that's been really, really cool.
How many Vipers are like coming in and out through your shop? Like, I mean, how many are sitting there right now getting worked on? Because it sounds like a lot.
So
Sounds like a fair amount at least.
Yeah, we try to maintain a rule. Like that's something of a hard point for us. Geographically, right? Like our weather is not conducive to the idea of like you can't push stuff outside and let it stay outside in the middle of the workday. Like we don't want to do that from a security basis. So our doors are locked, our windows are blacked out, or all that kind of stuff. B, I don't love the idea of people's valued pieces, be it a 4th gen Camaro or be it a Viper or a McLaren, wherever. I just don't really love the idea of that car being out in any elements, let alone the elements that we are potentially exposed to for like 60% of the year. So with that, we're really handcuffed by our floor space that we have of car count. But at any given time, we usually have about 12 or so active projects, and then we try to cap ourselves at about 15 on-hand cars at any given time. And that's too much, honestly.
It's a lot of Vipers.
Well, it's
or a lot of cars.
Yeah, right. Least, yeah. It's not always just Vipers, but a large majority. Yeah. The other part that's hard about that marketplace is the space to safely store pieces when they're off the car. So the hood is all one big clamshell piece on there, right? So we have these super industrious racks that Aaron, the other Aaron at the shop, that he built that are concrete anchored to the wall, block walls and whatnot. And I mean, they are the amount of weight that we hung from them individually to make sure, and that hood only weighs 30 something pounds or something, but we were hanging hundreds of pounds per one to make sure it wouldn't move. So we've got, we're hanging our hoods on the walls with foam protectors and stuff like that to try to keep, take good care of people's cars. But you start running out of real estate to take these things apart. When you blow one of those cars apart entirely, it's consuming a lot of physical footprint. So that becomes kind of a challenge. I don't know, average out throughput throughout the years, we're typically somewhere around, this depends on the complexity of the car, right? But we'll range anywhere between 8 to 12 new builds per year, and then quite a bit of return project work, which is something we really, really enjoy, to where
upgrades.
Yeah, we've got some customers that we've been working on their same car for maybe 5 years now or so, and every 1 to 1.5 years they've enjoyed what it is, and then they go, okay, what's the next level? What do we do now? And then you revise.
The curse.
But
kind of our curse of car guys.
So it is, right? But because we're all car guys and because we're sympathetic to it, we try to design that in. So we try to think when we, a big part of what I do when talking to somebody about a build is understanding more of what you really want to do with it. Tell me your goals now. Tell me your goals that you could maybe see in 2 or 3 years from now, because they're going to be different if you're anything like any other car guy. Yeah. And so maybe we can build in a little bit of overhead to this and think a little farther than our nose, and maybe we set it up so that upgrading later is a lot easier and not a complete throw it away and start over type
leave
process.
Room for the bigger turbos.
Yeah,
leave a little bit of breathing room there, and
yep.
that kind of stuff. How much track support do you have to give? If a customer just leaves with their car and they're gonna go race it, how far into that do you go with a normal customer? Do you go to the first track outing and kind of work them through it usually?
Oftentimes, yes. It depends on their experience level. Depends on our relationship level. I mean, that's kind of cool. I mean, we've some guys we've done several different builds for, maybe not even just Viper, but other things. And so if you get a gauge for that person's capability, then you might not necessarily need to be there in person, but you're available via remote and kind of be with them on that. Sometimes you do the in-person thing. I guess it just depends on the individual situation, but I like going because we're car guys, right? So we like to see the stuff.
That's your car that you just finished. You want to see what it does. Is this thing gonna live up to what I think it's gonna do? I mean, at this point, they're probably, I don't want to say cookie cutter, but what you're putting out in a way. Yeah,
we've got a really good idea. I mean, the part of that is just a lot of testing in the car before it ever leaves. So that is something that we try to do quite a bit of, and be it dyno or track testing, but a lot of that to make sure that okay, this is working the way that we kind of want it to here. Cookie cutter, it's funny you say that too, because that's the way to make money in this industry, which it's not an easy industry to make money in the the total vehicle builder aspect. That's something that's I actually think is kind of a really common misconception that
Parts is a better deal.
well, yeah, because you see the price tag that gets. I mean, like I'm okay saying like it's not cheap to have us build a car, right? But I don't think it's expensive either when you really break down what you're getting, what kind of hours are going into it, what kind of engineering time has gone into it, what knowledge are you purchasing at that point? Like you get to skip all the mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Like you get to jump right to the like, okay, this is what will work well. But at the same time, we as a company, we're our own worst enemy because everybody in the shop, all the guys, are consistently coming up with ways to refine and improve and make it better, and not from a like, hey man, we could do this and save this. Like that's about never the thing.
This won't break.
Yeah,
if we do this,
it's much more of the evolution of like this is better or this is cleaner, or this looks nicer, or this makes it more serviceable or whatever. And oftentimes that ends up costing us as a company more money, but we just do it because it's better. And so there's very, very, very few Nth Moto cars out there that are like identical clone of one another. I'd be hard pressed to actually think if there's one that like is exactly the same. Similarities in footprint and overall design structure, sure, but like we rarely leave a cam profile alone. We rarely are like just not changing anything. It's usually learning and applying things to the next one kind of thing.
So on transmissions, like how vast do you get on that? Because the sequential stuff's awesome on the Viper stuff.
Yeah.
The stick shift, people will always love H pattern, but at that power level, I think it becomes like a little bit more of just a cool thing rather than like a, I don't know, it seems like a lot to go drive a 1,500 horsepower, 1,600 horsepower stick shift car on the street.
You should try 25. It's way better.
Like H pattern, like actually not like click, click, click. Yeah, I'm curious to hear about the stick shift stuff.
So, yeah.
Trans.
It's so rewind to earlier in the conversation. We did a sequential Turbo Viper as like the first car that we really debuted as like ours. Like it had an Emco DV46 sequential in it back then. Super cool gearbox. And I mean, it's a blast. Sequentials are awesome. They're really popular now. Like now they've become really mainstream. Part of that is the product availability and packaging that a sequential trans has been brought into. There's also a lot more manufacturers out there for them now, and it's gained acceptance into the straight line go fast market where it was never really seen for a long time. When we were talking about that car that we did within Hefner, we did that Hollinger Airshift sequential box, and back when that got done, I can say this with humor now, and hopefully it gets taken by humor by those that know the story. It was referred to as this racing dog box, and like you don't want that in your car,
Oh, it's gonna be terrible.
Right, and then turns out it went fast, and then like all of a sudden, all these Lambos started having air shifted sequentials, and we're like, oh, it's so weird, So like,
funny how that works.
Yeah, no, they're extremely purposeful and awesome. Have you driven a sequential car, like in the flesh in an application? Okay,
haven't gotten the chance.
And that's not abnormal, right? Like there's not a ton of people that have. They are super cool. My personal opinion is they're wonderful at their intent, and their intent is to beat on and make rips in and have a good time and all of that. If you like driving your car, like driving it, it's not the ideal solution in my opinion. Now, that has just everything to do with NVH, right? Noise, vibration, harshness. They're loud. There's a lot of noise transmission, no pun intended, that comes up through the shifter assembly because the shifter assembly is direct metal to metal to metal all the way down into the gearbox through all the shafts, all of that. When we do sequentials, we use 6XD. Killer awesome pieces, they're like jewelry, man. They're so beautifully made. The design of them is incredibly intelligent with the bearing supports on either side of the gears and all of that, and a really great group of guys to work with because a Viper will, like if you think you've got a driveline solution, cool, let me see it, because like we'll probably kill it because weight, low numerical gearing, and big torque. All right, and a lot of traction too. So that's the recipe to break stuff often. So sequentials, I'm getting there eventually. I know I'm kind of wordy, but they're great, but not they're not as much fun, in my opinion, if you like driving the car around often. And we got to coach people on that stuff, right? Because the internet has made everybody think that a sequential is like the coolest thing you could ever possibly have.
They look awesome in like the, TX2K street racing videos.
Sure, yeah, and
Great for that.
and they're purposeful for that, right?
Yeah.
Like that makes great sense. If you want to drive your car for an hour to dinner with your significant other, can you do it? Sure. Are they excited about it, or are you excited about it? Maybe. So that actually led us to, okay, so sequentials, right? All right, great. Performance, go fast, great. Auto, super robust, awesome. The biggest detriment to an auto conversion, and a lot of people do autos, and I think they maybe miss some critical engineering elements to it that if you ever heard somebody complain about an auto making a car like uncomfortable to drive in, I think immediately and go like, man, you must have not done a very good job putting it together.
And when we're talking auto, we're talking turbo
400. Yeah, I'm just like going right away into like the big boy stuff.
We're not talking like a 4L80 or something.
No,
like I'm sure
there are some people that have done it in Vipers actually, but maybe not for high power applications at that point. There's a lot of chassis work you have to do in the cars to make it fit. It does not just go in. There's a lot of solutions that you have to come up with. The electronic integration is really tricky. How do you make this car that is looking for all these different sensors and pieces of the puzzle now not know that it's not there, or be okay with the fact that there's this automatic there instead? So we had to work on that quite a bit. But they're very robust. They're very fast. They're very smooth. They're very heavy. You have to be really careful about cooling aspect on them. There's a lot of things that you got to do right to make them work.
Yeah.
So it's not a super easy integration into our chassis. Then you have the aspect that a lot of Viper guys think that an auto is like sacrilege, right? Like, oh, how could you put an automatic in a Viper? Like, oh, well.
Especially some old GM transmission from
yeah,
the
right,
70s.
right, yeah. Where the reality of it is like the only thing GM, JC Beatty at Junior at ATI, we were laughing at the other day. The only thing GM left in that thing is the GM spec nail that holds the shift rod arm in there. Everything else is different at that point, but nevertheless,
completely aftermarket.
Everything. Oh yeah, definitely. But
even once you do the lockup, it must make it harder because then you have that inch extra on the bell housing that people don't realize with the lockup. The converter is suddenly a little bit longer, and then you also have a adapter. To make that, so you have, I don't know how thick your adapter is. Mine on my Camaro is about a 1/4 inch.
Yeah, ours are
a half inch thick almost.
Ours are 5/8. So.
Yeah, probably about the same. Yeah. So I have this flex plate that's this thick, and I'm sure you guys have the same type of stuff almost.
What's the wheelbase on the 4th gen?
I don't know, 114 ish.
Okay, all right. So ours is 98, and so then you end up with a drive shaft that's like yay long, so like your angles are really, really important. You got to get all that stuff worked out ahead of time, longer than like, hey, I'm ready to put a drive shaft in the car. So there's a lot of intricacies to doing it right. But we got that nailed. We know how to do that. It's awesome. If you can get over the fact that you're probably not going half-mile racing in the car anymore unless you want to zing that thing to the moon RPM-wise, then it's a really good solution, and we do that for a lot of things. And then we have our own very, very well. We've been working very, very hard on our overdrive solution for that will live at the power levels that we can do it at.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure I was supposed to talk about that. So
it's okay. I know. I mean, a lot of the Dragon drives use overdrives on the back of theirs, but you're already saying you have a very short drive shaft, so that makes it a little tough.
Yes.
The lockup helps a lot with cruising.
Yeah. Yep.
It does its best, but then with your gearing, I mean, you're already kind of in a good cruising zone anyways.
And then the ones that a lot of the Dragon Drive guys run, like we've tried that, and it won't necessarily work at the power level that we need it to if we want to apply it while under power or utilize it like that, right? So utilize it like a 4th gear. So that all comes to manual transmission stuff, right? We have put a significant amount of investment into developing our own gear set for the TR6060 transmission because frankly, we tried everything else, and we can find the limit of everything else pretty easily. So we have Worked very hard on that for over 2 years now, and this isn't like a sales pitch thing. I just like we don't talk about this stuff very often.
Yeah.
But it's so gangster. I mean, you look at the gears and like they look like they should be in a mining truck or something. And yet you look at it and you're like, this is going to be terribly, terribly loud, and it's really not. So that's really exciting. But so at this point in time, we do our own gear set for the H Pattern 6060. The only thing stock left about the transmission is basically the tail shaft housing, the shift rail, and the main case, if that. And then we're working on that also. But
Yeah, I've seen a couple of people break those in T56s.
Yeah.
What was the reason to not go with a T56?
So the car comes with a TR6060 factory.
Yeah.
So we just started there. But adaptation of this gear set can go into a 56 Magnum box at that point.
Okay.
So, which that's a whole different topic that we could talk about at some point. But
I mean, it's interesting because I've been around the stick shift stuff a lot in a Corvette, which is arguably the worst location of working on
try
a
that.
T56, and you got a freaking what is it, the tube, the torque tube,
Yep, torque tube,
one of the
diff
most
attached to
miserable
it
things
and all that.
ever.
Yep. Yeah.
So I've been around that a little bit, and I've seen a lot of T56 stuff break and fail.
Yep.
But nobody really does TR6060 because it was only Viper and like 5th gen Camaros, I think.
Yeah, I mean they're in.
And then CTSVs.
Yeah, they're in some stuff. I mean the Magnum F is a 6060 gear set in a 56 case layout, but the case layout is really, really similar. I mean, they're the same in the front plate and the mid case. Basically, the tail shaft is different. A lot of the variations in those transmissions come into input shaft length, output shaft length. I mean, there's some dimensional changes, but meaning like Vipers had like a big output spline compared to some others. But if you're talking like take this transmission and put it in this car, it is really input shaft length, output shaft, tail shaft housing, and shifter location.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah, is the shifter location fairly reasonable on that thing, or is it weird?
Yep. No, I mean, it's fine for us, but I mean, the engine's completely behind the shock towers, and then the engine's long, and so the shifter's right there next to you kind of thing. It is a direct shifter into the tower mechanism right then.
That's nice, yeah.
But anyways, we designed that thing trying to be smart enough that turns out there's not a bunch of Vipers out there. So we've designed it so we could implement it into other gearbox applications for people. But we vetted it out of like, look, if we can put, like we've put as much as 2,400 pound-feet of torque to the wheels through it at this point in time. I mean, there's fatigue along the duration of its lifespan, but it lives, like it's in there. And that's, that experience is super cool because now you're talking about you still get the normal H pattern driving experience. It's full dog engagement, although we were very unique about the count and spacing and all of that into that, so it drives really nicely. Plus then with Motec integration and a proper strain and all that, it's clutchless, upshifting, like anything above, well, wherever I program it, but usually I do like 15 or 20% throttle and above. And then some dynamic cut strategies based on load and throttle and speed and all those different things.
And
that
you
then
leave
makes
5th and 6th gear in it, I would assume.
Oh yeah, yep. Yeah. And those are full dog, just the same.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah, yep. And they so you can go wide open 4th to 5th, 5 to 6 if you.
So like half mile guys would really.
Exactly. So
like
it's
something like this.
It works great for drag stuff. It works great for roll stuff. The performance differential is minor between a sequential box and a dog H pattern, if we're really being honest with ourselves. I think Stuart from T1 is one of the guys that really marches that beat or marches out on that drum a whole bunch because his S2000 was a sequential layout and he wasn't allowed to run it in some of like the stick shift style classes. Even though like both are outfitted with strain gauges, both are doing clutchless wide open throttle shifts, but one just has a lever movement back as opposed to a forward. And the H pattern guys, a lot of them are running lockout shifters anyways, so it's not really like a, I don't know, I don't think it's really a performance.
Or they run like a pro stock style one where it drops down to where you can't ever get the wrong gear, and then at that point,
what are we talking about?
How far different is it from a freaking Turbo 400?
Yeah, no. So
like you just click it a couple times.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. So I know he was one of the champions on that a lot, but I say it because the shift time is, in my opinion, the performance loss from a sequential to what we do for our H pattern stuff. the performance loss is so minuscule. It probably has more to do with the driver anyways in that outcome than it did on like making gear shifts at that point.
Yeah.
So, but it is very, very cool. You should make some time and come get a ride in one of those things. And it's a really, really, really fun experience.
I would love to ride one of those. Half-mile stuff kind of freaks me out a
Oh
little
yeah,
bit.
no,
I like
not for me.
quarter mile. I even like eighth mile, where a lot of people make fun of me. I'm like, I like eighth mile.
No, that's fine.
After the second eighth mile, there's really not like the second eighth. There's nothing really exciting going on besides like hope this thing don't blow up.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to have driven some pretty powerful stuff in my life, but certainly not as powerful as a lot of people out there. What's the fastest eighth mile trap speed or quarter mile trap speed car you've driven at this point?
It's my car. I've been 145 in the eighth.
Okay.
And 480s.
And 480s is awesome, obviously.
Yeah, it feels great.
Yeah.
And 60 foot's 116, 117.
It's
so
awesome.
it's like
feels good.
that's where it's fun.
Yeah.
Like
Oh, yeah.
that
Yep.
hit. And then after that you're just like
So and think about that for a sec from the physics aspect. The fun part is the G-force, right? It's the
Yep.
acceleration. It's not the terminal speed. It's not like if the car went 300 out the back, if it accelerated at 0.2 of a G the whole way to get there, like it almost turns into more of a panic scare of this is cool, not like the thrill ride type thing. I don't know, in my opinion. Now, I've
Yeah.
never done Bonneville stuff. Jay Marr speaks so highly of it. I mean, that sounds very, very cool. I don't know if I want to do it, but I could see the appreciation
seems
for
cool
it.
to have a red hat.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah,
You
I
know,
touched
Jay wears
it.
his.
Oh, I got to touch it. Yeah,
He wears his with pride,
yeah,
man.
yeah. I gave it a little rub, and I felt real special. But no, it's the G-force off the hit is the thrill, right? Well, so you're probably on math on that. I mean, you're probably in the low twos for peak G, somewhere around in there.
Yeah, roughly, yep.
Yep. And what's cool though is when you can get that 1G plus acceleration at 170 miles an hour or something. Like it shifts your brain around a little
Yeah.
bit, right? So I can't even imagine what the people that drive like really, really fast stuff feel like. But when you feel that, it's like your brain really has to reach to accept what's happening at that point in time. So I think that's the thrill rush. So when you talk about the quarter stuff, like, man, besides the fear factor of like if something's going to let go, like once you've got past that and the combination feels pretty sorted, that top end Excel, that's pretty thrilling.
So I guess the difference would be a lot like your power is probably going like up still. You're feeding it in
Yeah.
up until the end of the track. Like you're probably like when is all the power in when you're
Great question, right? So like, where are you at on the Camaro? Like, are you I'm assuming you're on a time.
all of it
ramp,
is
right?
in the second I let off the button.
Okay, which
It's
is
like a nitrous car.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It needs to all be there
Right.
or else I'm not going fast.
right. We're so like when
I don't have power on tap.
like Juggernaut or Kratos, either of the two 6-second Vipers you were talking about, those cars aren't all in on power curve. All the serious drag racers out here right now are going to be like, this guy's either full of shit or he's like dumb, one or the other, you know. But those cars aren't all in on power until usually around 2.7 to 3.1 seconds out on the track. So we're already like out of the
300 feet,
330
yeah.
plus, and like then we're there, which is like kind of pitiful when you think about it. Now, I'm being hard on ourselves, kind of like what I was saying to you earlier. Like I'm being that way because like I know we've got so much to
Yeah.
improve upon that. But part of that is back to that walking that fine line on the heavy car without an adjustable suspension. Like it's just a little different, right? Yeah, you're in it. You make it through the 60, or you make it, 150 feet out, and it's really coming alive, right? And it's still got that thrill of like it's still coming as you're getting out there,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So the back half of the track happens pretty fast. Like it's not really like a fear factor thing, I think, in my opinion, at that point, as much. So yeah, when you got the big power to keep throwing at it, I think it does change the scale.
That could
of
definitely
what you got
add
going on.
excitement to
Yeah.
it. Like my car in second gear, it's just like it hardly even accelerates through second gear.
Yeah.
We make everything happen in the front half of the track, and
Which is smart.
it's
you
a
know?
small motor.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
3 liter with a 86 millimeter turbo. Like I got to make it happen like a nitrous car.
Absolutely.
You got to be all in as soon as possible.
Yep. Yep.
And that's it's kind of the difference in tuning.
Yeah.
Not really tuning because we don't really have anything to tune into it. For example, I let off the Transbrake button at 6,200 RPM.
Oh yeah, all right.
Like it's
Right.
it's spiced up.
Yep.
Where do you guys kind of?
Depending on the track, 38 to 41.
Yeah, that's like long.
Yeah.
That's like a tractor.
And like 6 pounds, 7 pounds,
Man.
something. Yeah. Yep. If you try 10 or 11, like,
Probably builds boost so quickly too.
yeah. I mean, even for fairly large stuff, like they're pretty we're reasonable on cam profile, and it's got good stroke in the motor, so like they do all right. But yeah, I think, and back to like the H pattern thing, like when you feel that stuff in track settings, the cool thing on that realm in the Viper is kind of that it messes with your head, because you're in an unprepped surface, you're not going to put down everything that car has in second gear, right? Or I should just say, like, you're pre 100 miles an hour, like you're not going to apply 2,000 some odd wheel horsepower in a no prep condition, if you're following what I'm saying by that.
Gear ratios are probably pretty spicy too.
Sure, yeah, right.
First and second.
Yep. So what's neat is that aspect of, like, on a pull in those type scenarios, you really are still feeding the power in out to 150, 160 miles an hour, so that Excel is pretty well like sustained or even increasing in some cases if you can, which that's kind of like the exciting part of, like, okay, it's still getting faster and we're going faster. So it's a thrill ride for sure.
So I guess that would probably come into a big tuning side of things, where you do a boost by, how do you, by torque?
How many inputs?
Front wheel, rear wheel, drive shaft, like you just kind of input everything. And
well, that's a challenging thing, right? Because you're trying to, as a calibrator, you're trying to think through all the different scenarios that the end user might find themselves in. So if we're talking a strictly tracked car, well, most people run like a time-based scenario or something like that, with maybe some reset stipulations in there or something along those lines. But when you're dealing with non-race cars, that you've got a driver, and you're not, like, you as the calibrator, you're not maybe there in person, and you're not looking over everything. It needs to be pretty dynamic. So there's varying, like, well, on our stuff, like 9 varying levels of ramp rate, basically, that the driver can choose from at any given time. And then it's going to be looking at throttle position, road speed, or surface, whatever you're going to call it, front wheel speed. It's going to look at traction control intervention. It's going to look at intervention, meaning like how much power is already being reduced, so how much more boost target should go in or should not. It is, of course, looking at gear. It's looking at engine speed. It's looking at all those different things to basically kind of map out what is the potential ideal throughout this run.
Is it kind of trying to plot like a...
Kind of like a time graph, if you would think of that, if you weren't all in right off the hit. But
I'm imagining an end user that maybe is driving it and does 10 pulls kind of back to back.
Yeah.
And that's where it kind of gets a little tricky, you can easily do a time based off a Transbrake button.
Right.
Very simple.
Yeah.
That output is very, very cut and dry.
Yeah.
But when somebody may floor it 6 different times.
Yeah, from different speeds.
Back to back from different speeds. Yeah, different road conditions.
Yep.
That's where it gets
different
really...
engine conditions, right? What was air temp when you first started doing it? What is air temp now? Beyond safeties, even oil pressure, coolant pressure, fuel pressure, different things like that. But just the aspect of, and that comes back into almost kind of our intercooler stuff, like
how good is the fuel that's in it?
Yeah, and we're overkill on our we're airflow freaks. Like, we really try very hard to make sure that we're maximizing our airflow potential out of our stuff, because the easier the turbo system has to work, then the happier the engine run condition can be in most instances. So a lot of our stuff can, can you ice it down? Sure. Do you need to? Well, we don't ever do it when we calibrate the cars as far as like dyno stuff for end customer. I don't want to necessarily tell them like just the max of what it can make. I want them to know what can it make after they've made 3 or 4 pulls already, and like this is kind of where it's settled into. So
if I, get this car and I'm going to go do some spirited driving, the car is going to start telling me when it's like it's going to start pulling power when it's like we're too hot or, you know, this or that.
Certainly.
It's going to start doing that.
Yep.
Because, you know, you don't want to rely on the customer to have to pay attention to all that stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
And one could argue they probably shouldn't have to.
Well, agreed, right? Like the
ECU thinks of that.
Part of the job is to make it back to that like OEM style, right? Like we want to make it as low thought process to the end customer as possible. And that's not to say I get a lot of people actually that just assume that people in a financial position that have these types of cars don't know any better. That's not true at all. I mean, I've got some customers that like bend my brain around sometimes and talking about some stuff, and I go like, oh man, that's a good thought. Like, you know? So I'm thankful for that because I think the way our company operates, it invites a certain personality that they appreciate the level of detail and engineering that goes into it, and they are of oftentimes similar mindsets with that. But I don't want them to have to feel like the car is work. We as a team want them to just get in the car and go enjoy it.
OEM plus.
And if it happens
experience.
to make 2,000 plus horsepower, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that's the idea.
And you have drive-by-wire, so that gives you so much cool control.
Oh, really cool stuff.
Yeah, that gives an awesome amount of control. And then two throttle bodies on top of that.
Yeah,
so
why not, right?
Yeah, hey, let's do it.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, so no, it's neat, and as a calibrator, it does give you a lot of capability. The fine people at Motec are awesome to work with on that stuff. We've developed a really great relationship with them, and learned a lot along the way of what you can really do, because that's always a question, right? Like, what do you do with that much power on a whatever tire, on a whatever gearbox, on a whatever surface? Like, well, you use like as much of it as you possibly can. That's the name of the game, right?
And that's an interesting ECU system because, like, it's very limitless. Like other ECUs, like, you know, you don't get to write your own kind of program.
Firmware for it, yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
so, like, you're kind of given what you get, but, like, this is, like, be creative.
Yeah, yep, yeah, definitely. I mean,
there's some people, like, Pro Drag stuff that are doing really cool features in that style of ECU.
Yes, very neat stuff. Yeah,
and seen some back end of it, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah, and I mean,
hurts my brain.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it really is. It speaks to the kind of back to what we were talking about, sometimes the expense involved in some of this stuff, right? Like you're purchasing the knowledge of someone that like created this solution that's supposed to make your life as the racer easier. So there's value to that.
Yeah. Right? So I guess we'll end this off here, but I wanted to talk to you about ethanol for the end. I know you're a big ethanol guy.
Yeah, that's true.
I wanted to hear a little bit of your thoughts on that. I love ethanol. Ignite is one of my sponsors.
Yeah,
they've been sponsoring my car forever.
Sure.
I've known Jay forever, and I know you're a big one ethanol guy. And I just wanted to hear, I guess, some of your preach to the people about the good word of ethanol.
Oh man, like look, the more people using it, I'll even try to say, like, regardless of the brand at that point in time, like I mean, good.
American made corn.
Yeah, that's I mean, I'm a huge proponent of that aspect. We became big believers in it, and really migrated just about everything we have and our customers to it. So all of our cars are flex fuel cars, and the vast majority of our customers, once they drive the car on ethanol, they don't ever not want to drive it on ethanol. And it's not just like the peak
you got
power.
to buy the barrel.
Like, well, yeah,
easy enough.
So yeah, and there is a benefit there with, you know, big motor stuff. We can make a lot of power on just about any fuel, you know. But yeah, when we're running for our experiences, when we're trying to like 10/10 performance capability, for us, the most reliable and repeatable stuff that we've worked with is 1-ethanol. And we've done some really dumb stuff on it, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not, and been
forgiving fuel.
Man, I've been really amazed. I mean, it's really amazing. And there's a lot of people that are like, oh, why don't you go to methanol or do this or do that? And it's like, I don't like, but what if we don't need to? Like, there's a lot of, don't get me wrong, there's a perfect place for all of that too, but, and maybe some of it is stubbornness, right? But like, we're doing really well with running on ethanol now and not having to go down that path of dealing with, you know, pickling a fuel system all the time, or the volume usages that come into play once you get into, you know, methanol cars and stuff like that. Like, we just don't have to deal with those things.
More hazard along with it as well.
Sure, yeah, definitely.
Definitely a safety concern along with methanol.
Yep.
I think ethanol gets a bad rep for ruining fuel systems.
It does, yeah.
But I think it gets just a bad rap.
Well, so this is it's a great thing to talk about. Like, it's one of the oddities in the fuel, and I'll try to hustle through it if I can.
No,
but like,
you're good. Take your time.
It's one of the oddities in the fuel market because its most prevalent usage is in a blended application, right? So you get all these guys that use methanol and they buy it out of a drum and use it in a drum, and that's what they do, and that's that. And they're like, oh, I've never had a problem with methanol. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Well, if you usually used methanol and it was mixed with whatever random hydrocarbon combination they could come up with to mix it to create M85, for instance, would everybody still have just as good of success rate with it? Or would you start running into that conundrum where you have this element, this agent being the alcohol that is like one of the world's greatest cleaners, right? And then you mix it with whatever they could possibly do to denature it or make it non-potable in that aspect. Well, on the ethanol side, and mix it with whatever junk that they could come up with that like makes it legally sellable, brings the price down, and like here we go to market. That's what I think happens in the pump ethanol world that gets people really kind of a bad rap on ethanol in its own right, because you've got this alcohol that's this perfect cleaning device mixed with this stuff, and that's where it's like the cars that run on 1R, like Juggernaut and Kratos, for instance, like they're flex fuel cars, but they almost never have gasoline in them.
Yeah,
those cars run on nothing but 1R all the time. They don't get the fuel systems don't get, like, we don't pickle them, we don't take them apart. Those cars sit sometimes for a couple months.
Hey, as cars do.
Yeah, and like we don't run into issues with that stuff. You do filter inspections and the stuff looks minty beautiful in there because in that stuff in particular, the base stock, what they start with as 100% pure ethanol, and the denaturant package that they're using in the R stuff, like it's not a leaded gasoline basis or anything like that. Like, it's just really clean stuff. So that makes me really happy because then like our service life on all the fuel system is excellent. And we've got that consistency and everything that we're looking for. So, but yeah, the bad rap thing, I don't, it's hard to get around it because there's just so much misunderstanding behind it at the same time. There's so much focus on what percentage is the ethanol, right? Like we've all seen it, like the posts on the internet, like, oh man, look at the beaker test. That thing is like plus or minus 5% or something,
It's a sticker that falls off half the time.
Yeah, so you get that. Let's start there, okay?
Yeah.
And then step 2 after that is now you've got human error involved, like how well did you follow the directions of said sticker?
Yeah, you had to add water to it.
Yeah, so now, then you've got the third element that we come into, which is the misunderstanding that, okay, so if I've got E75, whatever, you got 75% ethanol content that you've now metered in your beaker and you're really excited about that. You now know what 3/4 of the fuel composition is. 1/4 of it, 25% of it, however you want to word it, you have no idea what that stuff is. And you're never going to know, and not that anybody's supposed to tell you, but I never understand this about racers. It's like guys that show up with old tires at the racetrack and they knew they were going racing like 2 months prior or something.
Yep.
Like the combustible liquid that we knowingly decide to inject into our really expensive engines and all that, and guys are like, oh man, I don't know if I want to spend that money on that. And you're like, what? Like what?
Yeah.
Like
it's like oil too.
Yeah, it's like I can't ever understand
cheap
that.
Oil.
Yeah, right. It's all the same.
Yeah.
So I think that is where the bad rap on the ethanol side comes from. That so now you've got, everyone thinks, oh, if it's got 75% content, I read this white paper and saw this, and like the knock resistance is this and blah, blah, blah. And like, that's all fine and dandy, other than in the margin that most people are running their high effort engines. Like you got this little window of happiness to try to keep it in. And if you've got 25% of the combustible fluid that you're injecting into that, basically contained bomb in our cylinder, right?
Yeah.
You got 25%. You just don't really know what it is, or there's no real guarantee that is of any real known substance at that point. That changes that dynamic in the cylinder, and then you could run into problems. So when guys are like, "Oh man, corked a head gasket out of this thing, and I'm on the same fuel that I normally run from the gas station, and like, man, they could literally measure the same, and it won't be the same. Like and it's not saying the gas station's doing something wrong either. That's just the way that
it's just the nature of
it's the way that base product is done. So that's why we're really big proponents of running a extremely high quality fuel at that point. And yeah, we choose to use 1-ethanol, and then I don't have to think about it. Like, I never have to wonder anymore, like, oh, is there an issue there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
you have a direct line to the person that's making it. If anything's weird, if anything's changed,
yeah,
there's testing available and stuff like that. Yeah, I have a bunch of friends that I race with, and they just get pump E85, and I'm like, guys, you're crazy.
Yeah,
just get the barrels.
Like, it's really not that expensive.
And then they think that it's going to expire quickly too.
Yeah, there is that. Yep.
They're like, oh, it's going to expire quick.
Yep.
But Jay from Ignite's like, it lasts a while.
Yeah,
it lasts a long time.
And then at the same time,
normal fuel doesn't last very long either.
No, but I tell people, usually the best way that I can relay this is like, hey, I don't reuse gasoline like from. Okay, so we live in the, winter wonderland, right? Like, we have gasoline for our snowblower and we have gasoline for our lawnmower, right? But like, I don't run the same gas in the lawnmower from the year prior, like in the lawnmower. Like, I don't trust it to run in my lawnmower. Like, why would I do that with, again, like my super awesome engine that I've worked so hard on? So, but yeah, if with Jay's point on that, like, a lot of that comes down to if the cleanliness of the product is as good as what it should be in a barrel product at that point, you don't really have that to worry about on the, I don't know, the going bad type thing at that point.
Yeah,
especially if you keep it sealed, and especially if you're intelligent about where you keep it and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I think that's there's a lot of misconceptions in it. A lot of education needs to be done still. I have a lot of friends that are gasoline diehard guys, Yeah.
I mean, like, I can admit I used to be. Like, I still love the smell of C16 or Q16 or stuff like that. Like, yeah, I'm good with that. Ironic that I was just talking about the cost expense side of it, and then actually just recently I had to buy some C16 for the first time in forever for a nitrous enrichment project for an engine program we were doing. And I was like, oh my God, I hadn't bought it in forever. I didn't know. Forgot it was so much money. Either. Well, yeah. So in the realm of like barrel fuel, ethanol is like cheap, even the really good brands at that point. So we're very happy with utilizing that, and they've been a great company to work with on that stuff too. And yeah, when you say like if there's ever a problem thing, those guys take it really far. Like there's a batch. It's a known batch to each barrel assignment and all that. Like, you can, if there was ever a problem, you can get back to them and find out, like,
they're like serial numbered.
Yeah, and they they have the tech capability to do their own analysis on that fuel, and so like it's just, you just don't have to think about it anymore.
Yeah.
So.
It's very cool stuff, man. Well, that was a freaking awesome talk. That was so enlightening. I feel like so many people, I hope if they're still listening to this level, I hope their brains aren't melting yet, because there's so much awesome information. But
okay, well,
man, I usually end it off. Where can they find you at?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, got a website, nthmoto.com, nthmoto.com. Instagram, Facebook, that's pretty much the majority of it. I guess there's a YouTube channel.
I would recommend, go look it up on YouTube, because there's probably TRC videos titled with it, and 1320.
Yep.
Go watch and listen to some of it, because it's pretty freaking cool. So
well, we appreciate that. We need to get you in one so you can experience it real world firsthand, and then we should make time to do that.
I've only been in a regular ACR on the track,
which
and that was very
experience.
fun. It was on a road course, like actually thrashing it, and that was very fun.
Really capable cars.
Good cars for sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on, man. That was awesome. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keep it saucy. We will see you next time.